Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley, and wow, we got an absolute wonderful show. We got a guest that's been on a couple of times, and every time that we have this guest on, she always educates us, especially when it comes to the criminal justice system, which a lot of people don't want to talk about that much, as it relate to uh, death row, as it relate to the death penalty cases, and it's always two sides to everything. I mean, and many times when cases like that go before courts and your jury and all that, time people assume that you're automatically guilty, and they want to throw the book at you. But there is certain ways that mitigation and where we can really try to be fair with both sides. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before I go into this fantastic guest that we have, I have to always bring on my executive producer and co-host of the show, Dr. Michelle Denise Cooley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, James. How are you?
Wow, it's we made it through that tornado, whatever you want to call that thing last night, and
Oh
I
my
discovered.
gosh. We
I
we
just
thank goodness we got candles because we were in the middle of cooking. We just lit the whole house full of candles. And Bella, she's a black lab. I tripped over her because I couldn't see her in the dark. It's
but
terrible.
did not know that we had as much damage as we have. But for the listeners and viewers out there, yeah, we had some serious tornado, whatever you might want to call it, just they would rip trees up, rip roofs off houses, and flip cars over, and we made it through that. So we're happy to be here. But we do have some minor damage that we discovered this morning, but we're gonna try to get that taken care of. So Michelle, I'm excited about uh, the show today, and I'm excited about this guest. Every time she come on, she always brings so much knowledge and wisdom. Can you please let our viewers and our listeners know the title of the show, purpose of the show, and introduce this absolutely fantastic guest of ours?
Yes, the title of today's show is Can You Use Mitigation in Non-Death Penalty Cases? And the purpose of the show is getting to know mitigation specialist, expert Theresa Diamond, and learn about who uses mitigation circumstances as part of sentencing in non-death penalty cases and basically how it's done. And we're going to talk about the benefits of using mitigation in sentencing and why is this so important and why the public should really care about this. So Theresa Diamond, she was born and raised in the South Bronx, New York City. She attended public school and graduated from John Jay College of Criminal Justice with a BS in Criminal Justice Administration and Planning. She went on to gain employment in every arm of the justice system available to her. After over 25 years away from academia, she returned to school and obtained a master's degree in community counseling and completed her first year of her PhD. She's held the following positions: civil investigator, criminal defense investigator, investigator for the largest county public school system in Atlanta, integrated the juvenile probation office in Washington State, integrated the civilian police department for the U.S. Navy at Vanguard Submarine Base, court bailiff, clerk. Oh my gosh, she has done so many things. She relocated from Atlanta, Georgia to San Diego after living there for 28 years. She currently is a mitigation specialist expert hired by various public defender offices in Southern California. We welcome back to the show Theresa Diamond.
How you doing,
Hi.
Teresa? Welcome back. It's always a pleasure having you on the show because I know that we get ready to get educated a little bit more on the criminal justice system, especially as it relate to death penalties, mitigation of a lot of these things. So, hey, Teresa, can you tell our viewers and our listeners again a little bit more about you? I know Michelle mentioned that you grew up in New York and you've been all over and all these different jobs, but tell them a little something that we did not put on that paper.
Okay. Well, first, it's always a pleasure to be on your show. And my goal is to try to encourage people and to raise their awareness about certain aspects of the criminal justice system. What I haven't told you is that I used to sing. I used to sing with a large choir in Atlanta, and I used to sing with a smaller group and we did a lot of corporate gigs. And the last time I sang publicly was with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra on a Christmas show. It was a trio, me and two other people. And so I've always been a scared singer, but I could sing. But
You,
anyway, that's something you didn't know.
funny, we got Clem who's going to come in and ask a couple of questions. Clement
Okay.
Johnson will be soon, Dr. Clement Johnson. And he sings as well. Maybe we can get a duet or something.
Maybe.
So so Theresa, where did you get the passion um, in mitigation and being a mitigation specialist? Was it something that happened, or is it just something that prompted you, or have that always been a goal of yours?
Well, there's a couple of things. One significant thing is that when I was the chief investigator for the Conflict Defenders Office in Atlanta, um, paralegal that had an office right across from me was murdered, brutally murdered, and I discovered him. And I knew it was going to change me, but I didn't know how. And I got PTSD from it, and I could no longer look at blood. And I used to go to the coroner's office all the time. I couldn't do that anymore. And simultaneously, I would say the other reason was that my clients were becoming younger and generational. I had a father, his father, and a grandson at different times, so it was generational. And I also observed that there were mental health issues that the families didn't address. And so that was a shift for me. But I thought it was necessary because it's still in our communities even today. Um, Mental health is still something that we don't grasp. They throw around words like bipolar and schizophrenic easily today. But beyond that, people don't talk about it in our communities. And so I got really interested in that. My passion came from my mom. Like I told you before on previous shows, my mom just did stuff. She didn't announce it, she just did it. And I think I got a warrior spirit from her. So I care about minorities. I care about people who are not minorities. I care about people in general. And I think the criminal justice system, even though we still have the best system in the world, it has a lot of flaws. And people don't know about the criminal justice system until they're faced with it with a loved one or themselves. And so, just like all the programs that they have on television, like Law and Order, CSI, over the years, the last 20 years, I would say that jurors have become more astute and have raised their expectations of the level of evidence from watching those shows. Even though those shows are an hour, they're unrealistic about solving crimes in an hour, but still there's an ingredient in that that allows people to have realistic expectations of what evidence is, fingerprints and all of that. So mitigation is something that people don't talk about. And so I want to raise the awareness about mitigation. What is mitigation? The mitigating factors that can be considered. Now, previously on your show, I talked about mostly death penalty cases because death penalty cases have two trials, one for the guilt innocent phase, which is the first phase. And then if the jury finds the person guilty, then they go into the second phase, which is the mitigating phase. The state presents aggravating factors and try to support why they should give them the death penalty. And the defense brings up mitigating factors that they want the jury to consider. Now, mitigation is never an excuse. Johnny was poor, so that's why he killed people. It's not that at all. And that's what a lot of people think. Mitigation, really summed up, could be anything and everything. I'll give you an example, and we're going to talk about non-death penalty cases. I left Atlanta before I came to California. I stopped in Springfield, Illinois, and the Federal Defender's Office hired me. And the reason they hired me was because there was a new law that allowed judges in the federal courts to have more discretion about sentencing someone, and that discretion allowed an opportunity to present mitigating factors they wanted them to consider. So I didn't know how I was going to do it because I was used to doing death penalty cases. This was a whole different ball game, but I felt like I could do it. So the best example is the best way to tell you is to give you an example. So my first client was a white guy, 6'4", 6'5", 250. He was charged with fentanyl and causing the death of another. And when I met him, I know he was an addict. So I asked him, what hurts you so badly that you need to numb yourself from it? This big guy just broke down in tears. And over the time, I got to know him. Long story short, what I found out is he pretty much raised himself. His mother was an addict. His father was an addict. He had been in the service. He had lots of trauma. And so one of the most important things is I went and got his birth records, his school records, and this was a hanging judge. They were all kind of saying, well, this is really going to be a test case because this judge gives you the max no matter who you are. And I actually testified in that case about what things I discovered. What troubled the judge was that my client's childhood, I saw where he needed glasses. I asked him, had he ever worn glasses? No, he's never been taken there, have his eyes examined beyond the first examination. He had numerous serious mouth problems of decay and infections. And he dressed himself, he cooked for himself, and he walked himself to school. So that really made the judge sit back and look and say, you know, this guy should be looked at a little differently than other people. And that wasn't the only thing. There were a lot more other things. I also found his father, who had abandoned him at age 4. He bonded with his father more than he did with his mother. And then his father just disappeared. I found his father. His father was clean, came to court, and the mother told him that basically that his father had another family and that he left. And that's what started him to spiral. He was taking drugs. His grandparents owned a bar. He was drinking, aged 9, 10. You know, he just was out there. And he was trying to numb himself from the feelings of missing his father. And that sounds simple to some people, but that early in age could destroy a person's life. So in a way, the judge understood how he became an addict. And he felt like he should have a second chance. And people were shocked about the sentence he gave him. Because it used to be that they had in the federal courts, they had a strict sentencing guideline they had to adhere to. Well, it opened up once they said mitigation can be considered, and that gave judges some leeway to either come away from the max and give them something else. And for him, he was given a minor amount of years, like 3 years. And I also discovered that the girlfriend that they said that he was responsible for killing, they dropped that charge because what they didn't know is that was a friend of his. They were really close. And the mother had given him money to go pick up some drugs from her for her. And she told him, you take some out of it and give her this, and she's going to give you $40. When he left, she died because it had fentanyl in it. He didn't know that, but the mother sent him.
Wow. Hold that thought. We got to take a station break, but I want to pick it up from, because I think you own something. And our viewers and listeners out there, if you want to be part of this conversation, all you have to do is go to the comments, ask Theresa any question that you want, but we'll be back shortly after the break. It's your life. I'm Dr. James J.C. Cooley.
I never wanna leave. Yeah, I'm right where I wanna be.
welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and my guest, Theresa Diamond. I tell you, she was just talking about the story and how sometimes, even though a person might be predetermined on what they're going to do, but if they don't know all of the mitigation factors, they make a decision just based on the rules and not understanding that people are people, and that there are many different things that goes in a person's life that cause their thought processes to be different. And Theresa, you had mentioned something about the guy mother had sent him out to buy some drugs and gave
Yeah.
some to his girlfriend. Can you pick it up with that again?
Yeah, she continued to be an addict all of his life. And before she would go to work, she would send him out to purchase her drugs. And she knew at this time that he had started taking them. So she offered to give him a portion of it if he went to go pick up the money and get the drugs. He got the drugs from his friend. And actually, they were more than friends. They used to be lovers for some years. The state did not know that. They didn't look for it. They just said he was responsible for killing her. So, as it turned out, I enlightened them on that, and that charge was not. He was not sentenced on that charge at all. So, let me just deviate a little bit because there's a thing called ACEs, ACE apostrophe S. It's not a test. It's something that the CDC and Kaiser put together in 1997, and they said we need to come up with a way of identifying children who are in crisis or have problems at home, and we need to develop this so that we can intervene earlier. Now, this is since 1997. It's a 10-question questionnaire, and it asks you things like, have anybody ever told you that nobody loves you? Or have you ever been physically hit by someone? Or, things like that. This has been in effect since 1997. In the case that I just talked to you about, why is it that the school, he was absent a lot, but school was his sanctuary. But if they knew he needed dental work, he looked like he was neglected, why didn't they intervene? And this is what I talk about in terms of mitigation. Mitigating factors are things that don't have to happen, but they do. And because they do, people should look at that differently than someone who doesn't have that problem. Um, all of these things are preventable. But be that as it may, I'm glad that they have mitigation because it sheds a light on the other part of their life. I always tell my clients, whatever charges you have against you, that's one slither of your life, like in a pie. What about the rest of it? And that's what I do. I figure out what that is. They tell me what that is. I don't just talk about it. I go and get proof of it, put it all together, and humanize that person because I think they should get a second bite of the apple, or at least have somebody understand the full picture of what made them go in that direction or how they got there. I
Wow.
think that a lot of Black people and minorities have PTSD. When you're sleeping on the floor and dodging bullets at night and you can't sleep in your bed, that by itself has a ramification for you for years. Nobody talks to those children and find out what it was like or what they think. So they grow up in fear. I mean, there's a lot of ramifications of that. And these ACEs things should have been used where they took counselors out of schools. The teachers are expected to be the parent, the counselor, and everything else. But we have a large segment of society that is out here just lost, completely lost until they get caught up in something. Then we want to just punish them. Now, some people do need to go to jail. You do the crime, you do the time. I'm not saying that mitigation should excuse criminals. If you commit a crime, then you have to pay a price. But everybody's not the same. One size doesn't fit all. And so my thing is that I focus on the person, where they came from, how they were raised, who they were hung around with. I go every place they ever lived. I go to every school. I dig up teachers. I can't tell you how many teachers I met over the years on cases that I did that just burst into tears when I showed them the picture of my client when they were younger and they remembered them and the stories that went with it. You know, they said, "Oh, I knew he was troubled, but there was nothing I could do," and things like that. I mean, I think that everybody has a mitigating factor in their lives. Whether or not it should count is the question. What effect should mitigation have on any case? And so that's why I'm dedicated to this work.
So what are some of the challenges that a mitigation specialist, you know,
hmm
have?
Well, the biggest challenge is getting the trust from family members because every family has secrets, and usually the greatest, the greater the secret, the more mitigating factors are presented, and they do a lot of hiding. So our job becomes trying to navigate the family dynamics while simultaneously gaining their trust and convincing them of how you're going to use it. For instance, there's people were my clients that said, I found out things about their family and things that happened to them. I don't want mitigation to be said. I don't want you to use it because they don't want to expose their family. So those are some real serious things that happen in death penalty cases and non-death penalty cases. The problem with the death penalty side of it, if your client insists not to use the mitigating factors, you're pretty much doomed because you're trying to convince a jury to look at him or her as a human being. And when you have nothing to present to them, it goes nowhere, and they usually get the death penalty. There's a couple of people in my past that have done that, and they've gotten the death penalty. In non-death penalty cases, I think if you don't use the mitigating factors, you don't give a judge a reason to deviate from maxing them out or giving them a really stiff sentence.
Wow. You mentioned that mitigation is, I think you mentioned primary and state court. Do the federal system utilize that as well?
Yeah, I was that example I gave you was a federal system,
Oh,
and he
okay.
was charged federally. But in the state system, they now use mitigation as well. Um, One of the biggest thing changes that has happened is a lot of juveniles that were tried as adult and given lengthy sentences. There's now a section of the law, and a bunch of people are devoted to this. They've spent at least 15 years in jail on their sentence or a lengthy amount of time, and they go back and they find out what they did since they've been in prison. Like, did they go to school? Did they obtain degrees? Did they, whatever they did? And they also give a picture of what happened before they got incarcerated. And they use that, they put that package together, and they get a resentencing, which I think is wonderful. Scientists, especially neuropsychs, have already determined that our brain is still growing. It's not even fully developed under age 21. And so to hold juveniles responsible at the same level as you do full grown people is fundamentally unfair. It just is.
Wow.
In Atlanta, I had the first test case of a juvenile being charged as an adult. It was a big deal. Cameras were everywhere. And I don't talk about this case much because this case almost killed me. It's a young boy, 12 or 13. Long story short, they said that he had killed someone. It was a heartstring story because I remember being at home watching it on television on the news, saying that this man, who was a good family man and a father of two children, that this thug, my client, They called him a thug, and they said that he shot into the car with his 2 kids in the back seat because he was selling drugs on the corner, and the guy wouldn't turn his headlights off. Well, when I was sitting in my house, not knowing I was going to be a part of this case, I was saying, that don't even sound right. There's something wrong with this. There's something missing. Anyway, I got involved in this case. It was a big, big case, very publicized. They had already marked my client as a thug, kind of the worst despicable human being that you could think of. And I will go to my grave knowing he did not kill anybody. That's the short part of the story. What I'd like to focus in on is the mitigating factors that I learned about him. He's still incarcerated. On his 17th birthday, they transferred him from juvenile to adult prison. And so what I found out that his mother was a crack addict. His brother sold drugs. He held drugs for drug dealers when there was a bust. They would give him the drugs to hold because the police didn't look at, the young boys in the neighborhood. They looked at the runners, people running, and, the adults. And so he used to get paid money to do that. But when the murder occurred, the big drug dealer told him, I need you to take the fall for this because nothing's going to happen to you. You're a juvenile. And then as a consequence, he said, no, I'm not taking no murder case. I'm not doing that. I carry drugs for you, but I'm not doing that. As a consequence, the drug dealer was able to persuade his mother to turn him in, and planted the firearm that was used on her back porch. And she called the detectives and told them that the weapon was there. And from there, he didn't have a chance.
Wow. I tell you, we're going to take another station break, but this is so interesting. I don't even want to take a break right now. But well, when we come back, I want to pick this up, but I also want to talk about this most recent case that was resolved. And I think it only took the jury about 15 minutes, but they said it took 3 hours.
I think it took them 3 minutes.
And so I want to talk about that one when we get back and finish talking about mitigation, because I think that's what his lawyers are trying to bring up with a lesser penalty. But if you want to be part of this great conversation with Theresa Diamond, all you have to do is go to the comments, ask any question you like, and I promise you I'll get you on the screen. It's Your Life. I'm Dr. James J.C. Cooley. We'll be back shortly after the break.
chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? And everything that you do.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and Theresa Diamond is always bring it every time she comes to the show. It's always educational, and our audience and our viewers always become a little smarter as it relates, in this case, to mitigation, the justice system, and just how the process seemed to work at times. And so, if you want to be part of the conversation, just go to your comments and answer any questions that you like. And I want to piggyback up with the planting of I wouldn't say planting, but the weapon that was found on the back porch, and the mother pretty much basically turned her son in. Can you pick it up with that again?
Yeah, by the way, that was a state case. It wasn't a federal case, it was a state case. And the detectives went to her home and questioned them, and they had just left. Drug dealer comes by. He says to the mother, he knows the mother's a crack addict because his runners supply her. So he knows. So he said, I'll take care of you, And next thing you know, she calls the detectives back and tells them the weapon that was used in the murder is under her back porch, and they come and get it. And arrest my client. And because he was a juvenile, he went to juvenile detention. And so one of the probation officers there, because in juvenile court is set up differently. So the probation officers, when there's a detention person, they're the ones to see them. He took him to his office and said, you can make a call. I interviewed that probation officer. That probation officer said that he was standing there when he called his mother. My client called his mother. And he said, Mama, I'm not going to agree to take no charge for no murder. I didn't commit no murder, and I'm not going to do it. So did that matter that we had that witness? Well, what mattered was we had a really bad attorney who I can't speak for him, and I don't speak about dead people, but he's dead now. But the point is, there were things and factors that were never presented in court on this case by the attorney. A lot of the witnesses, like if I say you and Michelle were on the corner, and I was there too, and we saw this. But then when I interview you, you don't never mention Michelle. And you never mention me. You mention somebody else. Well, I hadn't made an exhibit that showed all these different people who said different people were there. Attorney didn't use it. The way they pointed the victim, played the victim as his loving father who was living in a really poor section of town called the Bluff. And he was working overtime, and he was taking his family out to eat dinner once a month. And they were coming back from dinner, and they stopped so his wife could get a soda out of the store. Well, I interviewed the person that was standing in line behind her in the store. That never came out. They even told me she had an orange soda. That's how, they were there. Then I went to the restaurant that they went to. They didn't sit down and eat in the restaurant. They got food to go. I mean, all these things were they let they just took away the whole thing about a thug, and they just built a story around it. And there were no mitigating factors in Georgia at that time. If you were convicted of murder, you got life, and that's what he got, life.
Wow. Uh, would you say that most of these cases that you're talking about and that happens, I mean, you mentioned that your clients are a lot younger today, but most of them uh, surrounded by drugs or somewhere similar to that?
Well, there's a couple of things. It's not just drugs. Scientists have determined that if you don't develop empathy by the age 7, you can't get it. So that's caring about another person or having feelings that. So if you live in a crack house, let's do that example. If you live in a crack house when everything is about getting high, someone falls, for instance, nobody says nothing. You know, they don't say, "Did you hurt yourself?" Like people who are not on drugs would do. They would check the person out and find out if they're okay. If you don't see any of that kind of stuff happening and you're raised in that environment, how are you supposed? That's how somebody can stab somebody 17 times, as an example. You know, they have no empathy. Well, where are they going to get it from? And some of the things that I have learned from my clients and how the environments that they were raised in, the things that they saw and heard and witnessed. Some of them it just blew my mind. I don't know how they came outside and put one foot in front of the other, to be frank with you. And these are things that people don't know about when they're sitting in a jury box. And I think they should know. I think that separates. Now, don't get me wrong. There are people out there that need to be in jail. No doubt about it. Because they're a threat to us and society at large. There's some people who, no matter what you do, they're insistent on being criminals. I mean, that's just a small portion of society, but most people that I have met, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm not speaking for the industry. And I've done a lot of cases in a lot of different states, and I find it's the same common denominator. It's not that they're poor, so they kill somebody. It's not as simple as that. It's their environment. It's in school. It's in your home mostly. And these young kids are growing up without identities. They don't know who they are. They don't belong to anything other than a gang. And there's a lot more complex things going on than people sitting in a jury box looking at this person and just reading the charges. How did they get there? So,
I want to mention this, and I know because it's fresh. Just had a case that ended, I think, yesterday,
yeah.
where the jury deliberated. They said for about 3 hours, but this guy changed his story about 50 to 60 times,
Right.
From being at the scene to not being at the scene.
Right.
As a jury, or just your understanding of them, do you believe that empathy, because this guy could turn it on and turn it off, at least what I was watching on television, at the tick of a moment, and you think that sometimes by doing that swayed the jury or the
First of
judge?
all, any sane attorney would not let him testify. And, they do have, I've had clients that insisted on testifying, which means putting nails in their own coffin. That's pretty much what it is. And he probably insisted on testifying because he thought he was smarter than the average bear. And he thought he could outsmart the jury. But one of the things the state always tells the jurors, don't leave your common sense at the door. You came in here with a common sense, use your common sense. I think the jury took about 3 minutes to come to a verdict, and they were back there probably counting up how many lies he told, because there were so many. I stopped counting. Now I felt like he was guilty. A friend of mine that lives in South Carolina and knew about this family and stuff called me when it first happened, and she said, "What do you think?" And I said, he killed his family. See, I'm not in denial about what some people do. It's the why I'm interested in. And there are some people who you can't answer the why because they're sociopaths. They don't have the ability to feel for other people, and they look at themselves as a victim. Just my personal opinion, that man was a sociopath. He had no feelings for anybody else. It was all about him. And the jury saw that. So there was no, they had to give him life because in South Carolina, that's what if you get convicted, that's what the sentence is.
They could have given him the death penalty?
They could have charged him with the death penalty because usually when they charge, every murder is eligible for the death penalty, but you have to have an aggravating factor. Now, to me, in that case, the aggravating factor was how many times they shot them and how they ambushed them. Then the other aggravating factors were the things like he did. It's about his character and what he did. You know, he stole money from people. He did all kinds of stuff. And those are aggravating factors. They could have charged him with the death penalty. And this is why I'm against the death penalty. If you don't charge somebody like that with the death penalty, why would you charge somebody with the death penalty because they killed their girlfriend? It doesn't make sense. So the people who benefit from charging people with the death penalty are only, in my view, prosecutors. One exception. Last week, a man was executed in Texas. And before he was executed, he said that Ron DeSantis did more harm than he did. He said, those was his last words, that he said, I did wrong, and I know it. He said, but Ron DeSantis did more harm than I did. Now, who would use their last breath to say that? But what I'm alluding to was the family. The family spoke out afterwards and said that they were very pleased that this man had been executed. I say that's an outlier because there are studies that show that the majority of people who are victims and they witness the execution, they come out feeling like there's no closure, and that is they didn't get the relief that was promised to them. You know, I tend to think it's revenge. It doesn't make anybody whole. So I kill you, and so the state kills me. That's state-sanctioned murder. Can't bring the person back. You should have to pay a price for that, but not death.
Wow. Let's hold that thought. We'll take another station break. But we're going to come back and we're going to pick it up. This is so interesting. And I tell you, you got a lot of things going on around in my head, and I'm sure our viewers they're thinking about this as well. So it's not too late to be part of the conversation. We'll be back shortly after the break.
Noah Dingley here, producer of The James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. And the new audio version of James' book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, is a must-have. James shares his true life story of struggle and success in America. It's both a cautionary tale and a roadmap to achieving the American dream. Get the new audio version of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James Cooley on Amazon.com or wherever audiobooks are sold.
watch you fight again. And if you want my opinion, I'll let it take me away. Only relief is the four on the floor and the crowd that goes, turn it up, 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 turn it up.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and just like I said, my absolutely fantastic guest, Theresa Diamond. We got to do this again in about a month because it's just too good, too much information. I believe that we have to keep the public aware of some of the things that are going on and some of the processes and rules and regulations, and especially when it comes to mitigation, when it comes to the death penalty, when it comes to a lot of the things that relate to the criminal justice system. So I applaud you, and I want to have you on this as much as possible if your schedule allow you to. So if you want to be part of the conversation, go to the comments, ask Theresa any question that you like. We'll get you an answer. Theresa,
Yes.
I was thinking about just doing a break. When it comes to the death penalty or making the decision that this person is going to get dead, is that solely the judge, or is it a combination of every? Can you explain that process?
Well, it depends on which state, but generally speaking, most states you have to have a majority. You have to have a unanimous verdict of death or not death. And if everybody doesn't agree, then it goes to life without parole automatically. There was a case in Florida for some years until it was finally settled, because some judges used to take it upon themselves. If the jury wasn't unanimous, they would impose the death penalty. And that changed. So you have to have a unanimous, or it automatically goes to life without parole.
So it wasn't like the old days when you walk in there and just hang him.
Yeah.
So how do the court system, prosecutors or defendants determine who is eligible for mitigation and who's not? How is that process done?
The prosecution has nothing to do with it. The defense is the one who wants to humanize their client, not just what they're accused of doing, but to talk about their life way before this incident happened. Because mitigation goes from the moment the crime is committed backwards until even sometimes pre-birth, when you're in your mother's stomach. And that has really shed a lot of light. Like, for instance, some people have fetal alcohol syndrome because in vitro, their mother was drinking heavily. Well, that distorts your brain in a lot of other things. Learning disabilities, all kinds of things. Now, is a learning disability an excuse for murder? Absolutely not. But it does shed some light that this person and a person who doesn't have fetal alcohol syndrome probably lived their life very differently. I had a serial killer once. It was a state case. And he told me, my family has never listened to me. I told them I couldn't read. They made fun of me. I told them I couldn't do math. They made fun of me. Now, anybody listening to that would say, so he killed a bunch of people for that? Well, no, that wasn't that wasn't the crust of it. I had developed a rapport with this defendant for maybe 2 years. And over the course of time, I learned a lot about him from him. And I developed a level of trust. And he basically told me that he was, sharing crack pipes with prostitutes. And that he found out that he had AIDS. And he would go into each one of them and ask them, did they give it to him? And they said no. And so he killed them for that reason. I told him I didn't want to know, but he told me anyway. But the combination of his family ignoring him all of his life and not listening to me, he told me, "You're the first person that's ever listened to anything I have to say." I took that to mean he wouldn't kill me, but when I went to his family's house, they all knew he was a serial killer. They all knew. They were scared. They were lined up in the house waiting for me to come to find out if he was coming home. They were scared, which means that that family knew that there was something wrong with him. Just like a lot of families who are in denial about their child being different from other people, like having schizophrenia or bipolarism or some other mental health issue. And it's not treated. And you're not treated because you don't know how to deal with a child who has these kind of problems. And then they grow up to be monsters. And, in a lot of ways, it's not their fault. I would never refer to one of my clients as a monster. I see the humanity in every single client I have ever had. They all have redeeming qualities about them. You have to look beyond the crime and see the person and get to know that person. And a lot of them, most of them have remorse. The state has nothing to do with mitigating factors because they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that. They want to be tough on crime and they want to prosecute people to the fullest extent of the law.
Wow. Theresa, we're down to the last minute. We can go on and on. We need to pick this up again in about a month if your schedule allows you to, because these are the type of discussions that we need to be having in the United States, all over the world, actually, and understand what the systems are that could help mitigate and help save and help prevent a lot of the things that are happening here. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show again. I'd like to thank my great executive producer and co-host for putting together another outstanding show. Most importantly, I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for tuning in to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. We'll be back Monday, all next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, same time, same place. It's your life. I hope everybody have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. See you Monday.
Thank you for having me.